In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Welcome to Be the Wellness Podcast, where we help you master your body, mind, and the experience of life through insightful conversation, interviews with experts and thought leaders, all with a side of marital banter and some good old-fashioned humor.
Yes, we are your hosts, Adam and Vanessa Lambert, and we're committed to helping you live life fully expressed physically, mentally, and experientially. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation.
Hello, everybody. Adam and Vanessa Lambert, podcasting from Casper Beach.
Yes, North Coast, coming
North
at you
Coast.
from the fog.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little foggy.
It's a little foggy, which is par for the course here.
Yeah. But I mean, for like Northern California fog, it's pretty mild.
Yes. We have been enjoying an amazing trip up here in Northern California. And, you know, it's super funny because Adam and I are both from this area, but neither of us had ever spent a lot of time in the redwood forests of Humboldt County, like up, you know, super far and deep in the North Coast or the northern parts of Humboldt County. And we had the most amazing trip to the redwood forests. And make sure you go and check out like some of the hikes and some of the stuff that we did there if you ever are planning on doing a trip to the redwoods. And actually I'm writing a blog post about it right now as well, because it has been such a special experience and we cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, totally. And we'll dive into the whole trip, kind of like where we went and all of that, not only in the blog post you're writing, but we're going to do a podcast on it specifically.
Yes.
Because there's some inside knowledge that we have, you know, developed that'll be helpful.
So you're going to want to know it.
You're going to want to know.
You're going to want that.
what we have to say about this if and when you choose to come up here.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what else you're going to want to know about?
What?
How awesome Mark Groves is.
Yeah, Mark Groves is awesome.
You know, this podcast is such a treat for us because, you know, as a married couple for going on 17 years, there's a lot of stuff that you learn the hard way.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And what I love about Mark is that he's really distilling out some of the fundamentals of what makes relationships work, what makes human connection possible, and, you know, clearing out the cobwebs of some of the things that really get in the way of us having the best relationships, not only with our lovers and our partners, but with our friends and the people that are in our lives. And so I just really, really love this man, love his work. And I'm so excited about this conversation.
Yeah. He definitely has a way of like, it's just kind of like the no bullshit versions of this stuff, but it's not angry. Right.
Yes.
So like this is one of the, I think this is one of the primary distinctions is that there's people out there that are like, this is the no BS relationship blog or whatever. And it's like, this sucks and that sucks. And you got to watch out for this, you know? And it's like, he's just not like that. It's a totally different way of being very real about what he's saying, but it's not like angry real. It's like some other kind of real.
I'm so glad you made that distinction because I think it's actually really, really important for people to distill that out, is that like it isn't about anger or resentment or retaliation. It's not like this BS, no BS thing that comes from like putting up all the armor and, you know, rejecting any like negativity or whatever. It's like it's coming from a real place of authenticity and love, and it has a different vibrational frequency because of that. Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of folks will resonate with what he's saying, or what he's saying will resonate with a lot of folks. Which way does that go? You know, me in the English language
you
may not be the person
Daisy,
to ask.
Daisy, which way does it go?
She says
it
either
goes
or.
the other way.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
The other way.
Something resonates with you.
Exactly.
Usually.
Yeah.
Got it.
So quickly, I'm just going to read Mark's bio because I really think it sums it up beautifully. Of course, you can find him at Create the Love on Instagram. You can find him at markgroves.com. And let's get into it. Mark Groves is a human connection specialist and speaker whose purpose is to help individuals and companies step into their most authentic, effective, loving selves by way of his bold, no BS relationship guidance. There you go. Mark brings complex academic concepts and research to life in a fun and relatable way, empowering teams and companies to transform the way they work, produce, and relate. He loves tacos, hiking, and making people laugh so hard they can't help but pee their pants a little. and it's like so true. We literally kicked off this conversation cracking up together.
Yeah.
So I love his bio, and it's so perfectly put, and I can't wait for you guys to dive into this conversation.
Bam, we are live. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we just, it's funny, when I was expecting this podcast, I was ready to get all deep and serious. And then we were just chatting before we went live, and you dove into the game Homeless or Hot in our beloved Venice. And I'm like,
my friend plays.
Yeah. So maybe start us off with that because I think it's good fodder. And, we'll just see where this goes, because I have a feeling it's going to take a completely different direction than I intended.
Well, I always laugh when I'm in Venice because, you go to the Erewhon there, which you kind of have to go to. And I'm like, okay, I go. And I'm like, everything's hot. Like the dogs are good looking. You're just like, this place is nuts. But my friend who lives in the area was saying that, we play this game, Homeless or Hot, at Erewhon. I'm like, that's so funny. Because when you're there, you're like, wow, is this? And then we were just joking about, you're like, is this person asking for money? Do they need it? And then they get into a Bentley or Tesla. And you're like, oh, I need their money, actually.
Yeah.
And their I don't give a fuck attitude,
Yeah.
Well, and then you've got the whole category of homeless and hot.
Right.
And you're like, whoa.
Right. Homeless and hot. Yeah. That cause you're like, wait, I can save him. My codependency can save him.
Exactly. I've got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Been practicing for this for years. Yeah.
I was raised for this. This is perfect.
Training for this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love it. So, I really want to start off with this, I love what you do, what you're up to, your voice, just everything that you say is so raw and so real. And I think it's so relatable for so many people. But I want to know, was there a specific time or scenario or a relationship that you came out of that you were like, all right, the line has been drawn in the sand. From now on, I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm going to be in integrity with my thoughts and feelings and emotions. Or was this a gradual sort of learning of different tools and modalities and kind of collecting things over a period of time until you were finally like, all right, here I am, world. I'm going to tell you what's up.
I wish it was an instantaneous thing. That would have made life
probably less painful, huh?
I would have had to write less articles about bullshit I've done, I always think of when I used to write articles more, they were a form of exorcism of my shame, in some sense of what I'd learned. I sort of felt like if I couldn't take the ways I'd been and if I couldn't take them and invert them or convert them into wisdom, then what was the point of them? Because they're so heavy for us to say old versions of myself I'm not proud of. And I think everyone can relate to that. It's just that, maybe historically as a kid, I always sort of prided myself on this idea that I said what everyone was thinking. And that wasn't always well received in class. But now, I sort of see it as a different thing of calling forward the truths that really exist, that people are just begging to be acknowledged about, and if I can in some way facilitate that through my experiences, then I'm so grateful to do that because, that from a state of privilege, to have an elevated voice, to be in sort of the, white straight male position is okay, how do I both honor this position and elevate voices of others too? And it's been a real adventure because, it was a relationship that was the first sort of catalyst to it. And that when looking back, I was 27, I was engaged. And when I ended my engagement, because, I got engaged and I thought to myself, to a really wonderful woman, I thought to myself, I think I should be more excited than this, and at the time, then it sort of had me dive into like, why am I not excited? What am I supposed to feel like? Because I was taught up until that moment that was the moment I was supposed to be seeking. Get married by 25 to 27, have kids by 30. And, it's the real, I think despite what culture you're in or what part of the world you're in, because cultures obviously move around the world, you're taught some version of that, and then your value is placed on where you are in that continuum, and not the quality of the relationship you're in, but just honestly, literally the status of your relationship status. And when I ended that engagement, it was the first time that I ever really made a choice that is consciously was me making a decision that went against the possibility of not being liked, that made it so I was not going to be liked potentially. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how did I get here? Because it was such one of those, this is why I love the moment of relational endings, because they're really this opportunity for us to hit some form of rock bottom, which are really just openings to put down the bullshit, to put down the mask. And I remember asking myself, like, how did I get here? Like, how did I get to this place where I brought another human with me? And I was so afraid I didn't want to get engaged. Why did I do something I didn't want to do? And I remember just asking myself that, and instantly it was like, you avoided every hard conversation. And so I made a rule from that moment that I would have every conversation I didn't want to have. And then it was just gradual, powerful. Like the rules got changed, amplified, integrity started to become more clear. And, I still had, I'd like to say that, after that breakup, I was just fully in integrity, but no, I certainly wasn't. It was like, I was still in a way, using other people as a way of feeling loved. And then as soon as they wanted something, I would run from them. So it was a relationship, which I think for almost everyone, it is that can catalyze us if we accept that invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all those small little compromises you make in yourself, right? Like, just sweep that one under the rug, and then that one, and then pretty soon you have a whole pile of dirt under the rug.
Right. And then you're tripping on it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you're tripping.
Yeah.
So I do want to start with this. I've said I want to start 3 times now, so I guess maybe we're not quite starting.
You want to continue.
Yeah. But I want to look at this love as an inside job because, really our relationships are a reflection of what we feel about ourselves or what is in our own hearts and minds. And so I want you to just start, and even on your website, I think the first offering you have is want to find out how to love yourself. And so obviously, that is like one of the most crucial pieces of being in a relationship is that you can first be in a relationship with yourself. But how do you approach that with people?
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions, which isn't a bad thing, but about what self-love is, and it is a combination of rituals and habits. It's behaviors that say I'm worthy of, I love myself so much because. So that might be taking time for yourself. I think in the meme culture, it's sort of like bubble baths and, rosé all day. Which is great. Don't get me wrong. That can be an act of self-love. I don't think you can have too many baths, but you can certainly have too much rosé. So there's a line though, where it also is about, there's this Buddhist principle that Pema Chodron talks about in her book, When Things Fall Apart. And it's this idea, it's called Maitri. And it's this idea of becoming best friends with yourself. Mm-hmm. So actually developing an intimate relationship with yourself. So asking yourself like questions and spending time with yourself, offering yourself grace, non-judgment, and so you cultivate this sense of home within self. Mm-hmm. And I think like the other things, like obviously like bubble baths or whatever it is, taking a walk, those are all acts of that, having boundaries. Of course, boundaries are probably they are for sure the greatest deposit into self-worth. And they have this beautiful symbiotic relationship, because when you say that's not okay, or this is what I need, or that behavior won't be tolerated, you're saying I matter so much that this is the level that which I will accept. This is the standard. And so it says to yourself, I matter. And then it tells the other person that you value yourself. And so it builds self-worth when you create a boundary, and it cultivates it, and it takes self-worth to have one. But there's a leap that occurs from a space where we might feel unworthiness. There's a leap of massive courage that needs to occur that leaps into the first no, into the first boundary. And that's a leap of going from certainty, even though I have no boundaries, I know that I'm still connected to people, even though it hurts, even though it's familiar suffering. It's better than unfamiliar ecstasy, really, in some sense. We'd rather live in what's familiar than stepping into this uncertain space. And it is through that courageous act that you sort of leap yourself in so many ways. That's the vulnerable leap of I trust, I surrender, I believe, I'm ready. And so it is it's probably my favorite moment to experience or observe or hear about when someone has encountered my work.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I can imagine that being very fulfilling. You know what I mean? Because it's like, because you recognize just how powerful that moment was for you, right? To sort of see that happen in other people, you're just like, yeah, get it. It's like them catching their first wave or whatever, getting their first muscle up. Yeah. Just keep doing it. Yes. You got it. So that moment, admittedly for me, is somewhat elusive, and it's like it's like it comes and goes, but I can really, I understand, I think very clearly, like the level of courage that it takes to do that. And something that I know for myself, I've personally experienced, and I think I've kind of seen it happen in other people too, is that it's like, it almost takes such a buildup to get to that point, that like first point of sort of standing up for yourself. I mean, and not necessarily physically, although that could be probably for some folks.
For sure, yeah.
But just in that sort of relationship moment where you're really going to take a stand for yourself, that you almost overdo it. You know what I mean? It's like a knee jerk. I'm saying no. And they're like, dude, I just asked if you wanted French fries. You know what I mean? And you're like, guys, no,
It's not about the French fries.
This is about me. It's turning myself. And so there's this, I can just imagine that there's this moment where that occurs. And then maybe people are like, oh, wow, I really kind of maybe overdid that. And then there's like a shrinking back. And like, so it must be some kind of a negotiation, right? Or something with yourself to just kind of ease your way into that, I'm assuming. And if that's been your experience with it, like how would you, help somebody kind of get to that point or through that point?
Yeah, that often can be the first step is, there are no walls. And so we'd call that like a permeable.
That's the one.
I don't know, lost that word. A porous boundary, so that you allow too much. And then the next step would be a rigid boundary, so it becomes a wall. But in some sense, so like the difference between those, a porous boundary, I'm connected to you, but I don't feel safe. I allow too much. I'm probably a doormat, too nice, codependent, all the things. And then a rigid boundary is sort of like, I'm not connected to you, but I feel protected. And then a healthy boundary is I'm connected to you, I'm connected to myself, and I feel protected by myself. And sometimes by the other person too, because really a healthy relationship is the other person wants you to honor you too.
Right.
Even at the cost of them. Not at the cost of an unhealthy cost to me, but I mean that if you need to violate a boundary to be connected with me, then there's no purpose. I would never want someone to experience that, right? So, so it is sometimes this rigid sort of pressure cooker response, right? As you were saying, that we can lash out, but in a way that's sort of a healthy first step. It might not be healthy in the way it's communicated, but that's what life is about learning, is saying, I said that the wrong way, repairing if you don't do it right. And a boundary really is a negotiation. So when you communicate one and the other person is allowed to say, I don't like that boundary, they're allowed to say, I don't like how I'm feeling because of that. And of course, this is if you can have a healthy conversation or some resemblance of that. And so really the validity of a boundary doesn't lie on the fact of whether they approve of the boundary or not. It's that do you need that? Do you need that space right now to process? Do you, so but what you said before about it could be like setting, self-love also being this idea of engaging in like a workout or something like that. So yeah, you can take the courageous act to go for a workout for the first time. It doesn't have to be just a boundary. It can be something that is disruptive to a pattern that is self-abandoning ultimately, and you can do that. That's why what you guys do, or you go and experience these peak experiences, you experience community, you experience connection. They all require each other, because if I just become really masterful in one area and don't work on the others, I will likely fall back in the one area I've experienced mastery. So if I'm all of a sudden like obsessed with my relationship with food or my body, that often becomes an escape and a soothing strategy to not deal with the boundaries outside. So where I'm over controlling one because I don't have control in the others, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Perfect sense. So I'm curious, because we're in a very interesting time right now. And, Adam and I we'll be married 17 years this year and together 20, right? Yeah. So, and we're in our early 40s. So when we got into our relationship, the world of relationships was a lot different. There was a lot more structure, I would say, and a lot more sort of definition of roles. And it's gotten just, I think, a lot more complex and a lot more confusing in a lot of ways for people.
Yeah, it does.
And so, sure. Especially if you layer on kind of the woke culture and just open relationships and just all of it, there's a lot to navigate for people that are trying to, figure out the relationship. So I'm just curious if you can speak to this idea of, I could feel that folks out there that are single right now and trying to create relationship it's probably very confusing to decide which boundaries are really theirs and which they should learn to be more flexible with, because maybe like the old paradigms are dying off. And so how do you help people negotiate like what's real for them and where they can maybe learn to be flexible because things have changed, if that makes sense?
It does. And you're right. I mean, the complexity of relationship, it isn't that long ago from an evolutionary perspective that you were born into your job, into your religion, into who you're going to marry. So when you have more choice, inevitably, like you get to choose your gender, you get to choose, like you have all these things you can choose, which, in research that can cause a lot of sort of freezing, it becomes this paradox where you don't value the thing you choose as much because you are constantly comparing to the potentiality of other lifelines that are different choices. And, in the research, if you start comparing your partner to a real or imaginary alternative, it's a really quick demise of a relationship. And not to say like if someone's listening and they're like, oh, fuck, I've done that. Yeah. Like, welcome to being human, but it's what you do with that. Because if you take the thing you desire from the other person and you start to ask for that, which can be way riskier and scarier, and start to become that within your own relationship, it can expand, like as you expand as a human, the container of the relationship has to expand too. And so formally, relationships were structured, especially, heterosexual, and they were filled with gender roles. Well, those gender roles are still here today. The reinforcement of them, depending on where you live in the world, depending on where your family's from, depending on the culture, depending on so many things. And they can live so subtly in so many ways where, for example, like a man is dating a woman who makes more money than him. And he just finds he's all of a sudden not attracted, or finds that he doesn't feel like he's enough, and he doesn't maybe correlate that, or he's defensive about no, I don't have a problem with you making more. I got no problem with a woman paying for all my stuff, right? Like in this protective way, but really underneath, he's been socialized to learn that his value is in his earning potential, much like a woman's ability to have children or be a caretaker or whatever it might be. And so, if she wants to be driven, then okay, great. But when are we, don't you want to be a mom too? And then you also get criticized by other women in those perspectives. Cause then it's like, wait, why don't you want to crush work life? You just want to stay at home and be a mom? Like that's, so everyone is judging and projecting based on their own socialization, really. There's a great line that I heard once on Christopher Ryan's podcast where the guy said, find people who love like you do. And that this idea of like, we've inherited our relational structures. Our relational structures are essentially codependency because the role you take on, if it's by socialization, which 99% of the time it is, unless you had parents who also rebelled against the stories they were taught, is the roles you take on required your self-abandonment of what was true for you, of what you really wanted to do. Maybe you wanted to do comedy or you wanted to do art and people told you you'll never make money doing that. How are you going to survive? How are you going to take care of a family? Whatever it is. And you don't take into account that you watched your mom get divorced from your dad and her not have any money and any support, right? So then now there's this other thing that's influencing the desire to make more money and the desire to be independent and not be open, right? So we have all these influences and the majority of them require our self-abandonment. And now relationships are really starting to at least have the conversation of, and this is really ultimately the goal of relationship is, how do I hold on to who I am and be in love? How do I, despite everything I've been taught, still hold on to me, figure out what I want, what I need, and differentiate that and stand in that and even negotiate that with what you want and what you need. And so I'm 41. And so I understand, when you guys are talking about relationally, how much things are changed. So, I meet lots of people in their 40s, 50s who sort of wake up in the midst of their relationship like, holy shit, I forgot about me. Like,
right.
I never even knew what I want or what I need. And so that begins, I love this idea that is the moment where there's now one partner or both, but it's usually one, is inviting the couple, the system, to take the mask off. And so what happens in that is the relationship will either fracture or it will deepen. And we have to be considerate because it's often when we're the one who's inviting the mask coming off, it's really pulling the truth out from underneath and bringing it, to the surface and saying, we're disconnected. We've never really done the same things. I forgot about me a long time ago. You made me forget about me, like that type of. And so there's the other person's thinking, oh shit, they're going to leave me. Why are they all of a sudden wanting to do things they love? Why? Wait,
right.
You want to work out in the morning now? But what about how she made coffee for me or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And so there can be when that, which I think is true of so many of the things we're facing right now, when that truth comes to the surface, it makes all the things that we've ignored come to the surface. And that is either going to be, I'm going to hold on to truth now, and it's going to be the thing that I align with most because truth is freedom, or I'm going to double down on my addictions, my escapes, my religions, my drinks, my whatever it is, and blame everyone else, blame this person for that, even though really the relationship is inviting us to be greater. And so when we're trying to figure out what we want in relationship, we have to first figure out, who am I below all the bullshit, below all the things I was taught? Where do I abandon myself for other people? Do I know what I want? Because if you go into a dating circumstance, because this is what most people do, is they say like, I don't know what I just want to date right now. But really they want to find someone to be with and have a relationship and build a family or share family because they already have kids or whatever it is. And the other person goes, yeah, I just want to date. And they're like, cool, I just want to date. And so there's more self-abandonment where we're like not honoring our own intention because we have learned to create low accountability behavior just to get our need met for connection instead of risking connection to be connected to ourselves. That was a long answer.
Amen.
It
no,
is.
I love it. It's amazing.
But so I just want to hover on the like very last thing you said, because I think it sounds really important and I want to make sure that I got it right. So but kind of what you're saying is with the self-abandonment piece is that there's a tendency for people to sort of, I don't know, what's the word? It's like you're not going to take everything that you want. You're going to settle essentially for something, but likely because it's not that on top of mind that this is exactly what I want and then are choosing to settle, but that you haven't necessarily done the internal, like the introspective work to know what it is that you want. And so you're sort of like subconsciously settling, but on the surface, it seems like you're making the decision.
Yeah, like if you don't get to know because most people don't actually know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They've been taught what they want, or they were denied everything they wanted and needed as kids. So they then make their life about what other people want and need.
Mm.
And so in the first part of the journey of getting to know who you actually are, who am I, right? That's like a old age philosophical question. Who am I?
Yeah.
Why am I here? And those are great questions to start to follow, because you might go, I don't know. And what a beautiful thing to realize, but also terrifying, because how am I at this age and I don't know? And, it's that idea of needing to develop a connection with oneself, and again, going back to the self-love that we spoke about at the beginning, is recognizing that where have I abandoned myself to maintain connection? Oh my God. Well, people learn that as kids because that's evolutionarily how we survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm thinking about this time with COVID and all that we've been facing as a global community, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about the suicide rates are obviously through the roof and people are really struggling with mental health. And I think a lot of it is the fact that so many of the things that we've distracted ourselves from or with for so many years have been taken away, and we're having to really sit with ourselves. And being with ourselves, I think for many people is very uncomfortable. And so I'm thinking about this process of trying to figure out who you are and sitting with yourself and just doing that introspection and how painful it can be for people at times. And I'm curious, like, how do you help people massage that experience, or be safe in that experience, or be gentle with themselves? Like, what are some practical ways that people can lean into that without it being so terrifying and devastating at times?
Well, I think, having conversations like this is a good way to say, like, hey, if you are overwhelmed by the immense dysfunction of the world, then it's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to Francis Weller, a psychologist, speak the other day, not live, obviously, but on a audio series he has. And he said, like, one of his mentors once told him that he needed to practice the yoga of ordinariness. Mm-hmm. And I sort of love that, because in this sense, we make our wounds unique or special, which they are to us, but they are normal in the human experience. And that's, again, not to dismiss someone's experience, but to say, okay, wait, if your wounds are normal, then now you're connected to other people through them, rather than those things being the thing that separate you, which is normally what we do, is we isolate ourselves out of shame, out of no one will understand me, which perpetuates the story that no one will understand us because we don't seek anyone to do that. And so the first part, in this sort of COVID has brought forth the truth of our mortality, right? It's been brought to the surface that you can't not pay attention to it. With that said, I think if you're looking at the research and the numbers, I think there's also some truths that are coming out that our governments don't always tell the truth. And there's some weird strategies that are being done. And I'm sure it's very controversial about, like we've seen. And again, this is all objective. I don't care what someone thinks about this. This is just facts. True facts, fact validated by Snopes, which is that one, they say wear a mask. Next they say, first they say don't, then they say do. and they say it's going to kill this many people, and then it doesn't. And then we're counting all these deaths that aren't really COVID deaths, and some of the tests work and some don't. And so there's so much dissonance even in the information we get.
Right.
So I've certainly felt that overwhelm. It's like, wait, if the government doesn't always tell the truth, which historically has always been true, there's lots of Netflix documentaries people can watch about that. If the governments don't always tell the truth and humans experience a large level of dysfunction, then why am I here? Right? It becomes this, okay, how do I face the pains of the world, and which can feel overwhelming? And of course, the answer that is always the most pertinent, which I heard the other day, a line that said, you can tell when a soul, the first sign a soul is awake is that it's angry. And I really relate to that because my anger is elevating. My anger for injustice, my anger for how we're taught to self-abandon, how we just are treated like children and just told what to do, and we don't question what to do, which is what we do with our lives. So on a micro level, the rebellion is claiming self and soul expression, true self-expression. And then that on a macro level creates an army of people who are self-expressed, who tell the truth, who don't put up with bullshit, who don't put up with inequality, wealth inequity, all these things where we see so much corruption and we're so used to just wanting to pretend it doesn't exist so that we don't experience dissonance, down more drinks, do more drugs, have more sex. And I'm like, no, like sit in it. And that's the part is, there's a line from Ram Dass where he says, you'll continue to experience the dark night of the soul, which is essentially feeling like you will be taken over by your feelings, but going into them, seeing that it's never as bad as you think, seeing that you can survive it. And then he said, when you'll continue to experience it till you've tasted enough of the spirit. And I always love that line because it reminds me that the more you feel you put your feet on the ground in nature, the more you sit below a tree, the more you watch a lake or the ocean, you are reminded of the synchronicity of life, of something sort of crazy is happening around us. And we're like, wow, we're part of a big show,
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting that you brought it to that point, because I think that, we are experiencing an interesting time right now where there's a shift in how many people have a religious background, or at least a religious belief system that is sort of dictating some of their behaviors and some of the paradigm in which they hold this reality as true. And I think that, folks are stepping away from organized religion, but we haven't quite got our feet all the way in the ground, like you're saying, into feeling part of something bigger, or feeling that cosmic connection that religion, provided for so many for so long. And so I'm curious about how you speak to people creating that connection with something bigger than themselves, especially when that, organized religion is not as prevalent for many people, or at least it isn't, creating the forum of their life as much as it used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that part is, for me, I grew up Catholic, not by choice, by birth, and my mom is from Dublin. So, there's a heavy indoctrination of Catholicism for her. And it was also some of the greatest sources of pain for her. When she got married, my dad was divorced before he met her. Her mom didn't come to their wedding. Oh. So, because she was taught that a divorced man is a bad man, my grandma, and then met him and loved him. And I continuously have seen in my life how religion has actually caused the excommunication of people, the removal of community, that something outside of you decides if you're good or bad, and right. In doing, and it's an old white guy with a beard, and,
right.
And so there's this idea, and of course there's beautiful parts of religion. It's just that when humans who want to control and manipulate take things and turn them into a way to make more money or to control behavior so that they're comfortable, then it starts to be used in an evil way. And for me, I really had a visceral body rejection of the word God for a long time. I couldn't, I was like, get out of here with that bullshit,
Yeah, me
like,
too.
yeah. And so it has been, for me, it was like when I started to hear words like the universe, or when I started to learn about physics too, because then I'm like, wait, my intellectual brain can validate this, But I remember thinking, like, my mind always goes in these loops, of like, why am I here? What's this? How are all these people in meat bags flying on a planet through, it's fucking a lot to think about.
It's a lot.
Right. And I remember saying that to this spiritual teacher named Gangaji. And she said to me, the mind will never understand what it was created within. And, I don't know how you can look out at a tree or a bug or your dog or whatever it is, or another person, and look in their eye and not just be in total awe. And I think for me, the thing that heartbreak, but also love, because they're similar, they are the same thing, it has continued to crack me open to notice more. And in the noticing of not running from my pain, of sitting in it, I have begun to notice not just all of the beautiful, amazing things that are surrounding me, myself always, but I've also noticed the suffering of the world. And I, for me, it's seeing that someone else's suffering is mine is when I continue to feel this connection to something greater. And I don't begin to tell someone what God is or what that is. I just know that there's a feeling of responsibility when you stop numbing yourself, that you start to feel more, and you start to feel more love and more compassion. And you start to witness people, truly sit with them and witness them because you've witnessed yourself, because that's that idea of like, you will never be able to love someone else deeper than you have gone within yourself, because you just won't know how. And it's much like if you don't cultivate love for yourself and someone tells you that you are so lovable, you might not believe them. It might be the first thing that goes, whoa, what? And you see there's a conflict of story. And so you might push them away, and you'll continue to do that till you learn that there's a story within you that's not matching what the universe is trying to give you, or God, or whatever it is. So I don't know. For me, the first part of the journey was reading Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I honestly had never thought, like, wait, I'm not here to just be a provider and make $100,000 a year, although with inflation it's probably a lot more now, and provide and have kids and just be that role and protect, that I'm actually here. And all the stories I was taught about what job I could do and what I needed to do with my life, they're all fucking bullshit. And when I started to not believe some things I was taught, well, that opens a fucking floodgate of like, holy shit, if that's not true, what else isn't true? Which I think we're experiencing on a much more massive level. And I don't know where some criminal cases are going to go, but they might unleash a whole other level of things that our psyche we're not going to be able to handle it with our psyche. We're going to have to handle it with our souls.
Yeah. I think that's really true. And, the piece of we're just not going to be able to deal, with the regular rational mind with some of the stuff that's coming up, because it's so ingrained, the biases that we already hold and the things that we hold to be true. It's like, once you start chipping those things away, it can leave you really, feeling like you're sort of dangling, And so I think that's a really an interesting way to look at that. And so, with that being, I think inevitable, at least in our lifetime for sure, I mean, for fuck's sake, the New York Times said there's aliens, you know what I mean? Like recently. So it's like, it's coming, it's like it's starting to get real. I mean, it wasn't really what they said, but you know what I'm talking about. But they,
like they acknowledged it, which most people go, that's crazy. There's aliens. We've heard this for fucking decades from other people. We call them fucking crazy. So I start to go like, so I start to go, okay, why now?
Right.
Thank you. And what's the answer?
What's going on with that? Well, let me tack one.
Man. Yeah.
Who knows, right? But so this piece of, we're not going to be able to answer this question with our cognitive rational mind, right? And we're going to have to deal with this with our soul. Like, what does this look like, in your mind? Is it just an openness and sort of like in touchness, for lack of a better term, to whatever it is that you identify as your soul, or just like recognizing that it's there and there's another way to, almost like another sense with which to view the world versus the ones that are all connected to our, rational mind?
Yeah, I think it's that, the idea of awakening is, at least in my experience, is actually just starting to ask why. Why do I do what I do? As opposed to just being in this automatic, like when you drive a car and you get to a place and then you're like, I don't even remember what road I took,
Totally. Yeah.
It shows you how much information one can process just with the unconscious mind. And so that's what we're doing with our lives. And so I think when you first ask that question, which that's why all rock bottoms are such a beautiful invitation, because they finally say, is it enough? And and that's that repetition compulsion. I will keep repeating patterns till I finally bring the wisdom home. And for me, at least in my experience, it's doing the deep work within oneself. That's how you can hold the capacity, because your container is void of all the stories and the bullshit you've been holding, the masks you've been wearing. And then truth hits us in different places. It's like when a partner finally says to us, I feel disconnected. And we know that's true. We've been experiencing it. Someone was just courageous to bring the truth forward. And I think that's really true of what's happening now is we all feel in our bones some of these things. I mean, how can you not believe aliens are real? That's an arrogant human perspective, which is the same perspective that we believe aliens are going to come attack us. And I mean, they fly in ships that disappear. If they really wanted to kill us, we'd be dead.
Thank you.
Which could mean that there are some with bad agendas. I don't know. But, even you start to get into the idea of like 3 dimensions versus, that's where physics really starts to speak to other things that are happening that we feel. And, like bees can measure the EMR or the EMF, EMR, or EMF of a flower to see if it's been pollinated or not. Like, how crazy is that? That's another feeling. And what can we feel that lives below? And I think as you excavate the bullshit and the stories and you get to know your trauma, you get to know how you've abandoned yourself, and you reclaim yourself. You go through the feelings that you've never sat in, and you may have to do it, unfortunately, through some sobriety if anyone doesn't want to do that. And you may find it through psychedelics. I'm not here to tell people how they get to where they go, just to say, like, begin the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of go back to that comment you made about not being able to stomach the word God. Yeah. Because this is, I think so many people can relate to this. And I was one of those people for many, many years. And, I didn't have a strong religious upbringing, but the idea of God definitely for me was representative of people who, in my experience, had been judgmental, had been rigid, had been unkind in many ways, had been even spiteful to a certain degree. It was my experience of the kind of people who held God as a cornerstone or a centerpiece of their life, and religion played into that. And it was in just the last couple of years where I did have an experience on ayahuasca where I got a full experience of God. And I'm talking about God as a single source, experience, not universe, not any of these other terms, but God. He, for me, because he came to me as masculine energy, although he was very clear to say he's masculine and feminine. So it's up to you how you want to
non-binary God.
Yeah, non-binary God.
But so I had this whole transformation around the word God. And now God is like my homie. I'm like,
I love that.
I'm all about the God. But what I realized was that, God for so many people is like a wound. It's a word that represents a deep wound of experience that they haven't come, to completion with. And so now when I have a class that I teach called Authentic Self, and when I talk to people about this, I say, call it whatever you want, but don't avoid the wound. Don't not call it God because it pulls up the wound. Like, go to the wound and heal that first, and then say use whatever word you want. And so I'm just curious from you, like, were you able to heal that wound around God? And like, what do you have? What does that bring up for you? Just that whole conversation.
Yeah, my resistance to the word was not, I didn't go into the wound, as you said. I built another church next door called the Universe. And then I realized my disdain for the church. And I went into that. And gosh, even thinking about organized extreme Christianity, Catholicism, all of them, doesn't really matter, makes me angry because I know that what was supposed to be and can be the source of much healing for people is also one of the greatest sources of rejection, pain, and suffering for people. And so, I started much like relationally, when someone says, I don't believe in marriage. And I'm like, okay, how do you define marriage? Because, words are just definitions that we agree upon. And like, you could say, I see a tree, and I could see a pine tree, and you could see a birch, right? Like we could be. And so that's why when someone says that about marriage, I say, just define it for yourself, change the definition, make it something that is harmonious for you, that feels good. Much like, that difference between settling and a compromise I meant to mention earlier. A compromise feels like you've deepened intimacy and that you didn't lose something, but you made a beautiful exchange to deepen intimacy. And settling is still self-abandoning. It doesn't mean that you can't go within and search for more of what would a compromise look like. It's just that it doesn't sit right in your bones yet. And you might not know what you want. So that's why it can also cause that, is it's an invitation within. And that with God for me was like, okay, well, how do I define? Because for me, God isn't defined by the Catholic Church or the Christian Church or whatever it is. It's defined by my experience of what spirituality is to me. So to not reclaim a word is to allow it to still hold power over ourselves, as you were saying. And so to go within that wound, much like relationally, we have to go within it, is to say, what is it about relationship that terrifies me? I'm not going to just avoid or choose unavailable people so I can still do relationship and just keep sabotaging it, keep experiencing pain. Go into it, much like you said, go into God, go into the wound. And gosh, you find within there, everything, you just find more of who you are, which is really the ironic thing is, it's like we're afraid to meditate or spend time alone or not use our phones. But all you find there is you.
Right.
Everywhere you look, right?
Everywhere you go. Yep.
Whether you like it or not.
Right. Exactly. And you learn to love it because you've taken the time to sit with yourself, which sends the message to your younger self that you're worthy of being sat with, you're worthy of being acknowledged and have your own presence instead of seeking someone else's presence to validate or replace your own.
Yeah. Amen. We lost our beloved dog of almost 17 years, just 2 weeks ago. And
man, they are soul messengers, aren't they? I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's been such a deep loss and such a soul wrenching time. And I just want to go into loss with you because if we live long enough, all of us experience it. Whether it's a loss of a furry friend or a parent or a loss of a relationship. And I just want to spend a little time, like, hearing your thoughts and wisdom around how to be with loss and how to bring, the light into that wound that can be so deep that it almost makes you want to clench up and say, never again. I'm never going to, subject myself to that because it's just such a painful loss. So how do you help people cope with that?
Oh man, it's something that we think, when someone experiences a loss, like your dog or their grandparent or God forbid, their child, we so want to protect them from the pain of it and rescue them from it. And it's important to know that we tend to want to rescue people from things we don't know how to sit in. And we can do that as parents with children. We notice their suffering or their aloneness, and we don't know how to sit in it. So we soothe our feeling by saving theirs. It's fascinating. And I think the same occurs with loss. In my relationship ended last August, September-ish. I realized that the loss of that relationship was bringing up for me all the losses that I hadn't processed. All the endings, and I think if it's not a mortality, it can just be the end of a relationship or a job or an idea or a dream. It just reminds us of death. It reminds us of the impermanence of everything. And the more I went into that, because I was like, okay, well, I don't drink anymore. And I was like, okay, well, I journeyed on a gummy, a THC gummy. And I could tell you that my emotions were not in the state that I was gummy friendly. And I remember
those gummies will get you.
Oh man. And I remember sitting by myself in the mountains. And I remember I was at a cabin, and I remember just thinking to myself, like, I need to go to sleep or my mind's going to fracture.
Right.
Like the feelings were just so much. And for me, I asked for support. I had a friend drive out the next day, and he came, on call, which was really beautiful. And I just allowed myself, for probably one of the first times in my life, to really be held by other people. We are not meant to carry our worlds alone. And I know, gosh, do we try? But we're not meant to. And so for me, if the loss feels too much to carry, then, I would always ask someone, what can I do? Instead of me trying to fix it or it's what do you need from me right now? How can I support you? And that really is an invitation to the other person to develop a familiarity with their own needs. Because so often we want to jump in and come with solutions, our codependency, right? We're like, I got it. I'll make you this. I'll do this, which is beautiful. And sometimes it requires that if someone doesn't know how to express. But I don't try to make someone avoid it.
Yeah.
I ask questions about it. What was the greatest part of that loss? What do you miss most? I'm sure with your dog, there's incredible things you miss. 17 years. I mean, he's a part of your relationship. Or she?
She. Yeah.
What was her name?
Penelope.
Right. I'm sure there's the experience of like expecting Penelope to run up the stairs or do whatever that Penelope did.
Yep.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. And I'm actually just feeling overwhelmed with emotion right now because so many people showed up to do just what you said. And it was the first time, I think, in my life I allowed that to flood in and to really hold me. And I just, what you're saying is so valid for what what we've experienced over the last couple of weeks. And I just can't say enough of what a difference it made. I mean, to allow that love and support in and to really, really let it in it was tremendously guiding and helpful and holding.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting kind of what you're saying about there's the tendency, right, when someone is hurting, for other people to want to do the things that would make them feel better, maybe, right? So it's like, it's comfort food, or it's whatever, and it's all coming from a very good place of just wanting to try to support the people that are around you. And I think that, I've certainly experienced a lot of that over the years in various circumstances. And this situation with Penelope was interesting because of COVID and our sort of just being remote from everyone anyway, but then all the social distancing and all of the stuff that's going on, it created, it took away that normal ability for people to bake cookies and bring them over and make you feel better, right? And so it opened up this other world of really, just exactly what you were saying, of just saying, hey, I'm here, I'm thinking about you, how, and it opened up a dialogue in it that I think was it was really beautiful, honestly, to see how people show up when the kind of almost societal norms of what you do for someone who's grieving wasn't possible, and so it's kind of making me think that that it's maybe innate in us to really know how to show up for other people, and that we tend to, package it up with kind of what you see on TV when we're not, when we have that available to us. But when we don't, we look inward and really share openly. And I think that's cool. Good for us humans.
Right. Yeah.
It's in you. Just look for it.
Well, I had a friend who was going through surgery a couple months ago, and he has 3 kids. And so, the community rallied and got them DoorDash gift certificates, and as a surprise. And that's, so I don't want to make it sound like, hey, don't help people, ask them what they need. Right. They say nothing. Often that's people who don't know how to receive. So the receiving itself can be a gift. And I just like to give people an opportunity to express it first. And the thing about loss that I kept reminding myself of, and I do whenever I experience it, is that heartbreak and loss is actually love. And that's a hard thing for some people to understand, because they go, wait, so my relationship ended and that's love? I'm in severe pain, or my dog passed away and that doesn't make sense. I've lost this great thing. And it really is the most pure form, because there's nothing getting in the way. Grief grounds us. It demands that we ground, that we stay still, that we are rooted in the earth. And, joy elates us. It lifts us. We fly. And so grief demands to be felt. And I remember sitting in my grief, just crying and thinking, this is evidence of my capacity to love, evidence of my ability to open my heart, despite every reason not to, despite past heartbreaks, despite whatever. And, you think of all of the gifts. In just me hearing about the story about Penelope, I'm touched, because you think of, even in Penelope's parting, she made sure that you had food and, support and that she's still, even a conversation about her is still warm. It's still the love you have for her is so evident. And what a gift that dogs remind us of unconditional love. They're just such a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love that. That resonates so deeply. And that is one of the lessons that has come through so much, is that her loss is only illuminating how much love we have held in our lives with her. And that in that process, it is so beautiful and wonderful, even in the loss. So I love that so much. I want to just wrap this up by just talking about the energy of love, because, I want really people to take a moment to consider the fact that your brand and what you do, your Instagram, Create the Love, is literally offering people the opportunity to connect and create something that is far more powerful than any obstacles that we're facing. And so I just want, as we wind this down, for you to speak to the power of the actual energy of love.
Man, no big task.
I know.
Big task.
But I know you got it, though.
When I chose that name, I was so averse to using the word love because I had come from a corporate environment, and I knew that people were in the corporate world afraid of that word, even though you don't have to go to too many Christmas parties to know there's a lot of love happening at work. And I thought that was such an interesting thing, that your ability to relate romantically and be in a healthy relationship would obviously transform and transfer to your workplace. And it would allow you to show up so much better. And I always thought, like, it's so fascinating to me that we avoid that relationally from a training perspective, when it is the very thing that will create the most committed, productive people.
Right.
And I thought to myself, like, well, we so often think like, I lost love. I need my relationship to feel this way. It doesn't make me feel this way. And instead of asking, like, what do I need to do to make it feel that way? That we don't see love as a verb, that it is an action. And there's a book by Eric Fromm called The Art of Loving. And in it, he talks about how if there was anything else that we wanted to become masterful at, we would go to school. Like, if you want to be a surgeon, you go to school, you learn physiology, you learn pathology, you learn surgical techniques. He said, but there's no other thing that we fail at more than love, that we don't actually take the time to learn. And when I left that relationship in my late 20s, I started to, wake up to, wait, I was taught that you get married by this age and you stay in love forever. And I was like, but wait, now I'm seeing divorces that I, for some reason, didn't notice before. Bias, right?
Right.
And I also started to notice that there were people who were married 75 years who hate each other. So I thought, well, a length of a relationship is maybe an indicator of relational success, but we're never celebrating the depth of a relationship. We're not talking about how to cultivate it. And I felt like I hadn't been taught the important things that you can create love, that it is by your being, by your doing, by how you show up to the world. And, my only real caveats to anyone and what they choose as a behavior is it from a place of kindness? Is it generous? Is it considerate? Everything else can be done, like, as long as you're under those guidelines. It doesn't matter what religion you choose. It doesn't matter what behaviors you choose, as long as they're guided by that. And, I think when we start to recognize that every relational outcome is directly correlated to us, every pattern we're in, we're part of. And when we realize that we're responsible for all of those things, which can be a painful realization, because then we say, well, why have I treated people this way? Why have I treated myself that way? Why have I allowed myself? That can become a great form of pain and shame. But turned within and owned, and saying, like, okay, it's not my fault, everything that's happened to me, but it is my responsibility what I do with it. And I will no longer tolerate a lesser version of me. A rule, a guideline that I made when I heard the quote from Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better, then do better. And I realized that I was sitting on so much life experience that I hadn't integrated. So many mistakes I'd made that I just kept calling mistakes, not realizing they were choices. And that really got rid of that sort of repetition, that continuing to do the pattern. And, and I think that's really where we began with the idea of self-love, is as you cultivate that home within yourself, it's sort of like going out on a mission, and you end up in the dysfunctional relationship where you are highly critical or you get defensive. But the coming home is taking the wisdom and integrating it and expanding your container. And I think when we do that, when we realize that everything we do that gets in the way of love is really just to protect ourselves from being hurt, then, say, for example, we get defensive. The moment I'm not defensive, where my partner might say, you do this, and I say, ooh, there's some truth in that. Then all of a sudden I've made a bridge to a conversation I've never been in. And so the container of both witnessing, being witnessed has exchanged, and the depth of the intimacy continues to to deepen. And that's where we can see that every challenge we have is really just an invitation to more depth within ourselves, within the relationships. You start to see that someone's response to your behavior, if you're responsible for your behavior, you can say, was that me or not? And you can start to differentiate between, is that me or not? The more you get to know yourself. And that's a healthy state of being. That's where you start to recognize who you are and separate it from who someone else is. And I think that just really sort of fits in with the, how do I hold on to who I am and be in love? And I think you do it by continuing to embrace humility and also the invitations to expand. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it. Kind of tied right back into where we began with this. So
right. Homeless or hot. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or about. Yeah.
Mark, this has been such a lovely conversation, and I knew it would be so wonderful to connect with you, and it really has been. And I hope we get to see you in real person. And gosh, I just love you.
Well,
that's all that's here.
I love you guys too. I appreciate you for having me on today. It's honestly such an honor.
Oh, thank you so much. And tell folks where they can find out more about you, the website, the Instagram, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So you can find me on createthelove.com you can find me on createthelove.com at the beginning of September. But I have markgroves.com for anything personally about me. And you can go find me at Create the Love on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I don't have TikTok, though. I'm not ready for that.
You're not ticking and talking yet?
No, I'm like, I don't know if I can handle another social media platform.
I know. I got on there and I think I did one.
Right?
And I retreated. I was like, all right, I made my effort.
Yeah. Well, you got that one with the handstand thing where you knocked the painting off the wall.
Yep. It was
a good
perfect.
One.
It was a TikTok fail, and that's all I needed.
But it was awesome. Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks so much, Mark. And we will be back with you next week. See you soon. Bye.
And that's a wrap. So what do you think?
I was so special actually to just to share a little bit with him about Penelope and that loss and to have him hold that space. It's been like a couple of months now, or has it even been a couple months?
Yeah.
Oh, it's only been a little over a month.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this loss continues to be a big part of our daily experience. And, I still am grieving so deeply for the loss of that little girl. And it was so sweet for him to hold that space with us. And I'm so grateful for everyone who's done that, everyone who continues to do that. And I just think it speaks to who he is. And it was just such a special gift to us. So we love this man. We hope you guys enjoyed that conversation, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.